One of the most unusual aspects of the pandemic that is occurring around our planet is that no one alive has ever experienced anything like this. There is a part of my brain that cannot accept this. I keep thinking there must be someone I know who was a mature adult during the influenza pandemic of 1918, the pandemic that I've heard most compared to what we are living through today. There must be someone I trust who went through this horribly difficult time, someone who could shed some light, some wisdom on how I can navigate this challenging period in my life. Someone I respect who could provide a bit of a roadmap forward. But no, I can, and I have begun to read about what happened about 100 years ago, but these histories don't provide me what I'm really looking for. I have found, though, some solace in imagining what those loved ones of mine, family and friends who are no longer alive, might have said about what has been going on. When my mind wanders into this area, I give up looking for wisdom based on pandemic experience and just focus on the wisdom that they may have shared from their life experience, their wisdom, or just the comfort or energy that courses through my soul when I think of what my father or my dear Uncle Arnold or my great Aunt Lillian would be saying if they were alive today. And I'm not alone. I've heard from friends and family that they too are pondering what their loved ones of blessed memory would be saying about the pandemic. And what they've told me is that the people they are remembering would have provided them a smile, some warmth, and often steadying, intellectually specific, positive, and hopeful messages. I first started hearing people's reflections on their loved ones who are no longer living by chance. This topic keeps coming up as I've spoken with people about what we've all been going through. And then to help me with these words today, I formally asked people if they would share their stories with me on Facebook, and they came flooding in. Susan and her daughter Corinne talked about Susan's dad, Norman, whose birthday always fell around Pesach. Norman was a microbiologist who prioritized hand washing before we all were, washing our hands after we were washing our hands. Norman, they said, would be advising them to try to cut through the noise, ask questions, and seek to understand the scientific facts of what's going on. Rena's mother would have said, "This too shall pass," a favorite expression of her mother's, and I would add of the Jewish people. One hears this in Israel constantly, but in Hebrew, Gam zeh ya'avor. Tanya's aunt would have reaffirmed the importance of always having some extra nuts and chocolate in the house. Julie's sister Debbie was a third grade teacher. And because Debbie spent her career around sniffly children, she had a large stockpile of hand sanitizer in her home. Julie and her parents have been texting and chuckling about how useful that supply would have been today, and how Debbie would have been sharing it plentifully, maybe even with pride, among her family and friends. Harold wrote of his Zadie, his grandfather Jacob, who weathered many personal and national challenges such as the Great Depression. Despite this, Harold said, Jacob's personal philosophy on life could be summed up in one word: dayenu. He was able to stay positive and grateful for what he had. It would have been enough for him to have the basics in his life. Jacob would have said, ride this crisis out and then keep plugging along. Abe's Aunt Sally would have been calling him every day just to make sure he was okay. Ed's mom, Libby, would have been worrying that Ed and others were not properly socially distancing. But we are today, so Libby would have been proud. My dad would have been using this crisis to affirm his belief in buying gold, even though I would add, with apologies to my dad of blessed memory, that this crisis has not definitively affirmed the worthiness of gold as an investment. Debbie's mom would have reminded her family that the words that end the Seder next year in Jerusalem do not have to be taken literally, that these famous words are a charge for us to aspire and hope for something better. Catherine's mom would have told her, one day at a time. Laura's dad would have said, stay involved, help people. People need love. Amy's dad would have been singing through this crisis and making up songs with the words COVID or Corona in the lyrics. My friend Scott imagines hearing the one word his grandfather would often say at the conclusion of the evening news class. He would shout, idiots! And David's dad, an officer, would have said the same thing he said after September 11th. I wish I was well enough to help. These reflections of what our loved ones would say are not only reserved for crises, they are there for us to tap into in the middle of a shelter-in-place order, during a Passover Seder, or on a regular Wednesday morning. Our memories of dear ones can steady and guide us, and they can also just make us laugh or shake our heads, still feeling the frustration of days of old, because we knew our loved ones so well. We knew them so well, and they knew us. They showed us the way. They drove us crazy. They instilled in us the most important of values. And they also sometimes modeled for us how never to act. They were not perfect. They were themselves. They were ours. And they remain ours. And with us today. And as we go forward. As we continue ahead into these unknown days, I encourage us to continue to ask ourselves and others about our loved ones who are no longer with us. What did they teach us? What would they be saying about this most unusual time? And what part of them do we want to affirm in ourselves and our behaviors, whether we are emulating them or transposing their weaknesses into our strengths? When we do this, we can truly say about them, Zichronam Livracha, their memories will always be for blessing. Amen. And I'll add a postscript to these words. If you would like to share a reflection on what your loved one would be saying about this time in our world, please go to the Central Synagogue Facebook Live page for this Passover morning service and share it. I would love to read it, and I know I am not alone. And thank you to all of those who provided me your stories of your dear ones today.